Hi there. Today we will be talking about supporting transracial youth. During this presentation, we will review some stats on transracial adoption, challenges transracial children may experience, and tips, tools, and techniques parents can do to support their transracial youth. Before we get started, I'll provide a little introduction about myself. I graduated from St. Cloud State University in 2008 with a degree in special education and an emphasis in learning disabilities. I spent a few years teaching abroad in South Korea, followed by working with people with disabilities in a variety of in a variety of settings. More recently, I graduated with a degree from the University of North Dakota with a bachelor's degree in social work. I have experience working in the social work realm with families providing case management where I would help families set goals for what changes they'd like to make within their family and improve their current lifestyle. I enjoy learning about others, supporting others in achieving their goals, and spending time outdoors, whether it be a walk with my puppy, tinkering in my garden, or enjoying a sunset. um, I do ask that during the presentation that you remain muted so there isn't any background noises. I will allow for some time for questions to be asked at the end, and during this time, I will ensure that you are not muted. Um, I believe there might be an option in this for us to be recording, and so if you'd like to listen to the presentation again or at a later time, that's absolutely okay, but I will be recording this webinar. Um, then I do have some expectations. Topics surrounding race, culture, etc. can be difficult topics to divulge in, especially in light of what's happening in our country. I do have some expectations of having a safe and kind space for all to learn and have discussions regarding supporting our youth who are transracial. In order to achieve this, I ask that you be kind in your words when you're sharing, to please be respectful in hearing each other and in how you respond. Um, I ask that you guys are encouraging of each other who might share or have questions, and I ask you to just be curious. I encourage you to be curious and learning more about how you can support our youth who are transracially adopted and in guardianship. And then I ask that you just continue to learn as well. Some of these words will be used throughout the presentation, so it's beneficial to have a basis of what these words mean. Race refers to physical differences that groups and cultures consider socially significant. Ethnicity is a shared culture. Some examples of ethnicity include language, ancestry, practices, and beliefs. Culture is a way of life of groups of people or in the way in which groups do things, such as in which a group dresses, builds buildings, religious beliefs of a group, and customs shared within that group. Racial identity is a belonging to and an identification with a particular group. Racial identity is important to be mindful of, especially for those of a minority group, as these individuals might see themselves as belonging to the majority culture and not recognize that or acknowledge that they're in a racial or ethnic identity. Transracial adoption is where parents are adopting a child that is of a different race or culture than their own. And then microaggression is a statement, action, or incident that is indirectly discriminative towards members of a marginalized group. Some examples of a microaggression include a man not cleaning the house because he has deemed it to be a woman's job, or saying, you speak English very well to someone who is of Asian descent. Microaggressions can have such a negative effect on people that the effects of microaggression can lead to depression, heart attacks, hospitalizations, and trauma. And then finally, biculturalism includes combining cultural attitudes and customs of two nations, people, or ethnic groups. Before we officially dive into the rest of the PowerPoint, I wanted to do a quick activity with you to see where you might be at currently. This activity is only to get you to think a bit more, to make you a bit more conscientious. I do not want to make you feel guilty or uneasy by any means or imply anything negative. I simply think this is interesting, and for me, this activity was very eye-opening. So when I read off these statements, keep track of which race fits into each category, whether it be white, Asian, or black. Um, the people in my favorite music group or band are predominantly what closely represents your race or ethnicity, what race closely represents your significant other. If you have children, what race most closely represents them? If you have children, what race closely resembles their friends? What is the race of your closest friend? The people with whom I predominantly worship with are my neighbors on either side of my home are my doctor is, my dentist is, my supervisor is, my coworkers are predominantly, the people in my social circle are predominantly, the author of the last book I read was, the people in my favorite television show are predominantly, during the course of my day, the people with whom I come in contact with are, and then finally, the person whom I most admire or who has had the greatest impact on my life is. So now I do understand that we live in North Dakota where the predominant race is Caucasian. So we are going to run into a lot of Caucasian doctors, friends, etc. Um, but take a moment to think about the task that we just did. What are the races that the answers are to the questions? How did you feel about the activity? What are some ways in which you might be able to change some of the answers? How might diversity impact the way in which you parent? Does anyone care to share their thoughts? Um, Interestingly, this activity made me aware of the things that I can do to help broaden myself a bit more, like the books that I read, the TV shows that I watch, and the music that I listen to. I found some really interesting statistics regarding transracial adoption. The majority of transracially adoptive parents are Caucasian, while children who are adopted come from racial minorities. Among all non-Caucasian children who are adopted, 73% of them are adopted into Caucasian families. About 84% of international adoptions are interracial. About 3 out of 5 international adoptions involve a child of Asian ancestry. And then finally, transracial adoption was first reported in the United States in 1948. Studies have shown that transracial youth face a variety of challenges. Transracial youth continue to experience racism even when living in homes where their caregivers are of the predominant culture. Some discrimination may be blatant and easy to recognize, such as the denial to be in activities or blatant racist comments. Other times, transracial youth may experience microaggressions that may seem unintentional or meant to not be harmful, but do leave a lasting effect on the youth. Some of these may be comments or questions and that include, I don't see color, or you speak English very well, or where are you from, where were you born? These comments can be detrimental to the overall well-being of the kiddo, especially if they're not addressed and processed adequately. For example, children who experience racism are at a higher risk of developing poor self-esteem, depression, and have higher rates of suicide. Another challenge faced is developing a positive racial or ethnic identity and a sense of self. If children aren't supported in positive identity formation, they can unconsciously incorporate these negative messages into a view of themselves, which leads to missing out on the possibility that may come their way, and kiddos can also begin to view themselves as less than others. Another thing to consider is that when a child comes into care of a family that is not the same race or culture, they're assumed to take on the characteristics of that family that they come into care with, leading them to not identify with their birth race or ethnic identities. Many of these youth experience an uneasiness with their appearance. When entering the world of being an adult, this can pose a concern for transracial youth as they're now seen as a person of color by society. Studies have shown that internationally adopted children struggle more with racial identity than youth who are domestically transracially adopted. This means that children adopted, say, from India, had a more difficult time forming a positive racial identity than a child of African descent who grew up in the US all of his or her life. This is because international adoptees are expected to assimilate and take on the customs and culture of the country they were adopted into. Transracially adoptees have difficulty finding a sense of belonging. Transracially adopted youth often view themselves as being a part of the culture which they come into care of, meaning they're a part of the culture from their adoptive families that the adoptive families belong in or belong to. Transracially adopted youth are basically caught in the middle of not knowing where they belong or which subgroup to identify as. For instance, if a kiddo is Black and is adopted into a white family, this child may be seen as too white from the mannerisms from the Black community and too Black to be in the white community. This leads to confusion for transracial youth as this kiddo isn't sure which culture it is okay to connect with. Being transracially adopted isn't always addressed appropriately, if even addressed at all, which leads to transracial adoptees struggling with the ability to cope with being different, and they don't have the skills to do so either. Parents may face struggles in raising transracial youth as well. Sometimes it's thought that love and good intentions is all that is needed in raising a transracial youth. Love and good intentions are great. All children need to be loved and parented in a manner that is good, but it doesn't stop there. Transracial youth need to know that their parent is the strongest ally that will keep them safe and secure, as well as support, encourage, and even teach them through some of the ickiness that the world throws at them. Parents also teach their kiddos how to manage and cope with some of the hard things that life throws at them, such as being berated at a concert for the color of their skin. Secondly, parents don't always recognize microaggressions. Microaggressions can happen so quick and so often that it's not easy to recognize them, as these microaggressions can be very subtle. It's important for parents to fine tune their ear to hear these microaggressions as they have such a negative impact on people. Some parents may also think if I talk about race, I'm causing issues. It's easy to think that if race is swept under the rug and not directly talked about, it won't be an issue. Talking about race and ethnicity can also be very uncomfortable, um, especially if it isn't experienced firsthand, but it's important to dive in and with an open mind so that the child can flourish into their identity as a transracial youth. And chances are kids are who are living in transracial homes are already thinking about race, culture, and how they're different. These kiddos just might not know how to bring it up or even know if it's safe to bring up or talk about. Therefore, it's really important for parents to bring the topic up and have these conversations, and just be the one to have to be the one that's promoting these conversations to happen in the home. Parents can also make this conversation easy with starting off by watching a TV show or a movie that has a transracial adoptee in it and asking what the child's views are regarding the show or movie and progressing the conversation to be more personable. Thirdly, it's easy for parents of the dominant culture to underestimate or dismiss the issues that arise with their youth. Parents might say things such as, you probably weren't being followed in a store, or it wasn't that bad, or maybe they're saying things such as, that's not what was meant by it. I believe that in our culture in the Midwest, it's especially true that we dismiss, um, as it seems that we aren't comfortable talking about the issues as maybe other parts of the country that host a more diverse cultures. Doubting an experience of a kiddo, however, and their perception of an event can have a very detrimental effect on the kiddo, as they may feel that their parent doesn't believe them and that it is not a safe place to talk about the issues. Instead, parents can offer comments like, "Tell me more about what was upsetting," or "I can see that you're really upset. What can I do to make it better for this particular situation?" And then really just follow through with what is needed for your kiddo to feel safe, supported, etc. Parents also pick schools that are good based on standards of what is important and beneficial in their eyes, as opposed to what may be important and beneficial for the child. Children spend a lot of time at school, and it's important that they're valued and safe while they're there. It's important to think about what would be important for the entirety of the child versus what the parent may think is personally a good school. So some of the questions to ask when determining if a school is a good fit for a transracial youth include: how diverse is the school my child will be attending? How are minorities treated at this school? What is being taught and how does that impact my child? Um, and how will the school not only educate my child but also support them in the formation of their identity? When determining this, parents may seem or they may deem that moving and finding a more racially diverse school to be important. Some parents may feel that they're also the hero in their child's life. Having this mentality assumes that kiddos are in need of rescuing and puts a huge pressure on these kiddos and can be burdensome as well. Um, as kiddos may wonder what is wrong with their birth home, with their birth family, their culture, and may not understand why their first home is so bad. Um, A parent's role is to teach, love, encourage, and provide for the kiddo, not to rescue a child from their first home. Supporting transracial youth will look different depending on the level of development of the child. Some things to practice with the children in the preschool years include being honest. Children, especially preschoolers, will have questions and comments about what they're seeing, hearing, etc., as they're trying to make sense of the world. Some of the questions and comments might be about how they, the child, look different than their mommy and daddy, or they might look different than their siblings or their friends that they see at daycare and school. Although it may be easy to say we're all the same, this may be harmful, as we are not all the same, and appearances do make a difference. However, it is okay to talk about um, how people are different, just making sure that this conversation is developmentally appropriate for the youngster. Encourage discussion about differences and ensure these discussions will be appropriate for the kiddo and that they're respectful as well. It's also um, helpful for parents to read books with their children that have multicultural characters. And it's also important to allow children to play games with toys and watch movies that show others in a non stereotypical way. Parents should embrace curiosity during the preschool years. Again, allow children to ask questions about differences, and it is okay to have these conversations. Parents should continue to offer answers that are honest and respectful. This allows for your kiddo to learn about others and that it is okay to be different. Parents should broaden choices for their children as well. And this can be done by allowing children to make decisions on activities they're interested in instead of stereotypical activities that are based on gender or culture. Another thing that parents can do with preschoolers is to foster pride. Parents should talk about the children about family heritage, both the child's heritage as well as the parents. This is to be done in a way that allows the child to gain positivity in themselves. It's important for parents to also lead by example. An easy way for parents to do this is by widening the circle of friends for the parent, um, which includes having friends from various backgrounds, cultures, and experiences. Parents, again, do this for yourself. Make authentic friends that are different than you. Even preschoolers are watching their parents and what they do, how they interact with others, and are learning from this. So when kiddos see their parent having friends from a variety of cultures, they see that being healthy and normal and okay. And it's also okay to be different. Um, During the elementary and preteen years, it's important for parents to model behavior for kiddos. Elementary and preteen kiddos continue to watch their parents, which is why modeling behavior is so important. Showing children how to embrace others, whether it be subtle or evident, speaks wonders over just talking about it. It's also important to acknowledge differences. There are fun ways to show differences that are positive. Some of the ways include learning a new language, cooking meals from your child's culture, and listening to a broad array of music. These activities may be out of the parent's norm, but can be fun and make a meaningful impact on a child. Also, as a parent, allow for conversations with your child about how they're different, and how these differences have helped them or hurt them, and learn about why they've been helpful or hurtful. Another important task for parents is to challenge intolerance. Sometimes kiddos may say things that they've heard at school or with their friends that may imply bias or prejudice. As a parent, by remaining silent or laughing at these comments shows the youth that it is acceptable. Saying "don't say that" isn't enough either. Have conversations about these statements that were made. Parents can ask, "Why did you say that?" and converse from there. Follow up with an explanation that is developmentally appropriate as to why these comments are unacceptable. Parents can also make moments teachable. Kids are often tired of being talked to and not talked with. So it's important to look for and take part in activities that can create a discussion with kiddos, and then having the kiddos kind of learn from there. For example, when watching TV, converse with your child about the stereotypes of certain groups of people, where these stereotypes came from, and why and how these stereotypes can be damaging. These lessons can make more of an impact on a kiddo as opposed to just lecturing. Parents can and should emphasize the positive. Parents can catch their child being respectful or empathetic towards others and follow up with praise. Think of how much better you do when you're complimented for doing something right rather than being lectured to for doing something wrong. And obviously, as we know, this is the same for kiddos. It's much more beneficial to be complimented and being praised for doing the right thing. And then in the teen years, continue to keep your teen talking. This can be challenging because sometimes teens like to do anything other than talking with their parents. Although this may ring true, it's important to continually teach our kiddos about being respectful and how they speak and act towards others and how they deserve to be spoken to and treated. It's important for parents to ask the opinions on where the teen may stand on hot topics and why they think the way that they do. It's important to also stay involved. Staying involved with other aspects of the teens' um, interests and activities are important. Learn about the music that they listen to, the shows that they like to watch, and the social media that they enjoy. Talk about um, the group of friends that they identify with, um, and then talk to your teens about the labels or the stereotypes that they're seeing in the music or the TV shows or the social media, and within various groups of friends. It's okay to ask your teen about the positives in each of the subgroups of media, music, etc. And then continue to live congruently. Um, Discussions with teens are important. However, more it's even more important um, for our teens to see behavior modeled, um, that they're talked to about. So teens continue to watch their parents, including who their parents spend time with, and also listen to how parents speak when they're with their friends. The lesson of what parents say, followed by what parents are doing, can be very impactful. So just continue to be mindful of that. Um, Continue to broaden opportunities. It's easy to become in our routine with our day to day lives. Find and support opportunities that will allow for your teen to meet others who they may not typically meet in their day to day lives. Allow for volunteer activities, visiting different places of worship, dining at or cooking various foods. Encourage activism within your family unit, find out what your teen cares about, and encourage them to become involved in activate or advocating for this cause. And then continue to encourage ways to promote healthy activism, such as lobbying, writing letters to city officials, and perhaps boycotting due to discriminatory actions that are seen. So we may ask, what else can we continue to do? What else can be done? Just as we talked about a few slides back about love and good intentions aren't going to cut it, parents need to be deliberate about their actions, words, and teaching opportunities. Parents can continue to lead by example. One way to do this is by increasing biculturalism within the family. Some ways to increase this biculturalism include displaying art from various cultures, creating a cultural life book about your child's country and culture, celebrating holidays that are significant to your child's culture, making food that reflect your child's culture, read literature about your child and other cultures, play games from a variety of cultures. If possible, take a vacation to your child's home country, listen to multicultural music. You could also choose a multicultural babysitter or respite provider. Choose a multicultural dentist, physician, or faith environment. Parents can continue to embrace their child's heritage by finding a hairstylist that can cut hair according to your child's hair needs. Learn how to style the hair of your child. This will speak wonders since you're taking particular interest in them. And then finding and using hair and skin products that meets the needs of your children. Like mentioned prior, parents can make multicultural friends. Parents can learn from these friends in a multitude of ways, such as viewpoints from their culture, ways to cook, ways to care for skin and hair. Having multicultural friends will also speak wonders to your kiddo as they see their parents with people from a variety of backgrounds. Parents can also help their child recognize when it's safe versus unsafe to respond to racism. If deemed safe, parents can help create ways to respond that are safe. Creating these responses can be done together, and a parent can support their child by asking them how they can help if a child wants to create responses on their own, and then continue to talk. Parents continue communicating on the variety of aspects that are within your kiddo. Talk about what their fears are when they're watching the news, of what they may fear in transitioning from a teenager to an adult, and continue to talk about what they're excited for as an adult. Talk with your kiddo about how they should be treated as a person. Communicate with your child through conversation and through action regarding how they should be treated as a person. Communicate with others on how your child should be treated, whether it be by teachers, staff at stores, or other customers you may be shopping next to. Talk with your kiddo about how they can respond in certain circumstances. For example, one of the scenarios that is important is knowing how to respond when being pulled over. For example, do hands need to be placed on the steering wheel? Tell the officer where the wallet is and ask to reach for the wallet before actually doing so. It's important to practice responding to questions transracial youth may encounter. In doing so, consider teaching your child who needs to know their story and how much of the story people actually do need to know. This allows for your kiddo to know that they have control over whom they share their story with and when they can share. Help your kiddo to know they do not need to justify anything to anyone. Help your kiddo to learn that they do not need to address their personal story to anyone if they're not comfortable in doing so. Along with that, if your child wants to share some of their story, help your kiddo find a way to do so. These responses or these answers will allow your kiddo to feel empowered. It's also important as a parent to continually learn and encourage your child and encourage learning for your child as well. One important thing to learn is that it is important to see color. Not so long ago, it was acceptable to believe that color didn't matter, but in fact, it does, as people of color are treated tremendously different. Like we've talked, it's important to see that there are these differences, to talk about these differences, and then to celebrate these differences as well. It's important to not only see or acknowledge these differences, but to converse about these so that children become comfortable with who they are, knowledgeable about their cultures and challenges that could arise, and be prepared to face challenges that may arise in the future. Learn about customs, holidays, traditions that are not commonly talked about, and learn how these are celebrated. Learn about how events that are seen in the media affect the community of which your child may belong to. Learn about how you can continually support your child even after they become an adult. Parents should encourage their child to continue learning about their culture and ethnicity. One way to do this is by seeking mentors for your child. Children may need positive influence from mentors in their cultural or ethnic background. Allow a mentor to teach various aspects that are important to their culture and make a positive impact in the child's life. Another way to encourage learning can be by going to museums, cooking a variety of foods, watching movies, and enjoying company that shares your child's cultural or ethnic background. And then continue to advocate. Advocate for unbiased educational material. It's important for children to attend school that presents material that is in fact factual, unbiased, as well as having teachers to learn how to work adequately and effectively with children of minority groups. Another way for parents to advocate for their children is by confronting racism, like we reviewed just a bit ago. Um, and it may be intimidating for parents, as parents may feel inadequate, but use the knowledge gained through learning and continue to learn about these topics as well. And advocate for things your child feels important for regarding their culture, and help your child to begin to advocate for the things that are important for them as well. There are a few things to avoid in raising a kiddo who is um, transracially adopted. First, parents of transracial children may find themselves talking only about the differences with their children. And by all means, it is absolutely okay to discuss and address these differences. Acknowledging these differences are beneficial in that they aid in forming an identity, but it's not okay to only talk about the differences, as it leads to the child feeling as though they don't belong within the family. It's just as necessary for parents to talk about the similarities with their children. Some of the topics of conversation about similarities may include shared likes and dislikes, personality traits, temperaments, gender, shared beliefs, and spirituality. Talking about these similarities also helps in building a bond between parents and the child. This bond that these conversations create leads to creating a secure attachment, which is another important component to raising a kiddo. The second pitfall to avoid is accepting racial discrimination as a reason for underachievement or bad behavior. There are times when children may do something that is not acceptable, and racial discrimination and cultural expectations do not explain why this behavior is done. With that, parents need to hold their child accountable for their actions. It may be difficult in deciphering at times, but it's important for children to learn to do their best. And then the final pitfall to avoid is overindulging their child out of fear of being inadequate. Parents want to see their children happy and thriving. Um, Parents may also feel inadequate, especially when caring for transracial youth. It's important to refrain from providing children um, any requests that they have. So you may be wondering why all of this really even matters. It's important to have positive racial identity, a sense of belonging, and the ability to confront and cope when difficulty does come their way. Positive racial identity leads to better connectedness and commitment to academics. This means that the kiddo will do better in school. Positive racial identity also leads to better psychological outcomes, such as higher self esteem and lower rates of depression. There's less risk of unhealthy behavior, such as alcohol um, consumption, smoking, and drug usage. Also, foster pride in who the child is. And a sense of belonging allows for connection both within the family unit but also within the community. That connectedness allows for a sense of support. that support leads to people to cope better with difficult times, and we know our transracially adopted youth can potentially have some difficult times as they continue to grow. There are many resources to utilize for parents who are raising transracial youth. I feel that the more a parent knows and starts utilizing, the better the outcome is for the kiddo. On this slide and the next slide is a list of books that are addressing issues or that address raising transracially adopted youth. I recommend Googling books to read over, which might seem more interesting at first, and then digging in from there. And then there are also books for kiddos to read as well. And this might be very important for kiddos to have a jump start in reading. So there are books for children, and then there are also books for young adults. There are also some blogs that are very beneficial to jump into. And so I recommend, just even if you have a few minutes to start reading, just dive into these different blogs and just kind of see some different viewpoints from there. Then there are also podcasts. If you're more of somebody who does better with podcasts, I recommend looking into these different podcasts and then listening to the various topics that are related to raising a kiddo who is adopted transracially. There are also some movies and TV shows that might be interesting to watch as they relate to transracial youth. And really quick, the movie Off and Running isn't about adoption, but rather looks at race and education in America. This movie follows two middle-class African-American boys and their experiences in a private school in New York. So while it's not necessarily related to adoption, it does cover some tough topics of schooling that our kiddos may face. There are some camps as well that may be fun to jump into and look at, if possible, going together. If you do have any questions furthering that or relating to this topic of supporting our transracial youth, by all means, please feel free to reach out. Your post-adop coordinators would be more than willing to help support you and your family in that.